It can be pretty personal, but it shouldn't be a taboo to talk about money and your financial health. It should be pretty normal. It is a part of your relationship, and if you're going to merge lives together, it simply makes sense for you to know about each other's money habits. So don't feel like you're doing some crazy thing by asking about your partner's habits and their earnings, but timing it well is pretty important, and understanding that at the beginning stages of relationship, your job is really to observe, to ask the right questions as well. But like, for things that are a bit more sensitive, it's okay to allow some time to pass, but then don't wait for forever. Let's move on quickly to how to actually talk about money in relationships, and some do's and don'ts, how to approach this conversation so that you can actually walk towards understanding what you both have. The easiest way and kind of the earliest way that people mostly talk about money is about splitting bills. From the first few dates, you figure out who's going to pay for this. Are we going to take turns, or is the guy always going to pay? And this kind of also helps you learn about the ideologies. There's some men who feel like, I'm taking charge in this relationship. I would like to pay for dates when we go out. And there's a woman who insist that let's keep splitting it until maybe at least we're going steady and we know that we're in a committed relationship. And that kind of helps you get into how they're thinking already, so you know if they're more traditional, if they're more feminist, or have had certain experiences in the past that have now shaped how they approach money in relationships. So these things actually start pretty early. So at the beginning, it might be conversations about who is paying for what that really help you figure out some of the ways they think about money. Now there is such a thing as having these conversations too early. So on one hand, you don't want to pry. If you've only been seeing each other for a couple weeks, you might not be able to ask yet about, like, do you have credit card debt? Do you have are you from like a very wealthy family, or things like that? There's a season where you might just need to wait things out and observe how they live their lives. If they seem to have like a lot of expensive things, you could be like, oh, you're balling. Like, are you like super into luxury things? And maybe that leads into a conversation about money. But like, instead of saying, yo, how much do you earn, it could be things you observe that help you have those conversations in the early stages. So for the first few, I would say, weeks to months, it's okay to listen and observe. See how they talk about conversations. Do they talk openly about debt? It might just come up one day like, oh shoot, today is the day where I need to pay, I forgot to pay my credit card today, or I have a student loan payment due today. I don't know if those things come up. Are they super frugal? They don't shop at regular stores, they always shop at thrift stores. Are they super bougie? That also kind of tells you their lifestyle preferences and what they're like. Are they a bit closeted about money and their financial situation? What's their idea of a fun date? All these things. If somebody wants to go on a helicopter date today, tomorrow they say, aren't we going to fly to Dubai? The other day they suggest the fanciest restaurants downtown where parking alone is like $50. Like, things like that can help you figure out what lifestyle they are aspiring to. There's this weird thing where some people don't even have the money, but they're aspiring to these lifestyles, and that can also help you see the mismatch. Maybe they live in a pretty terrible spot in town, but then they are asking for all these fancy dates. You can also have a conversation about that. So in the early stages where you're listening and observing, you really want to figure out how they're living their life, what their lifestyle preferences are. And you do this by just seeing, are they frugal, are they bougie, do they spend a lot of time in thrift stores trying to find like deals and bargains, are they always needing to find another pair of shoes, what kind of dates do they like, what's the idea of fun, how do they spend their time, and their discretionary funds. Literally, you can see what people think is important based on how they spend their funds. And some of these things you just observe by when you talk about how your day went, the things they say they went to do, they give you clues about how this person is living their lives. So in the early stages, there's a lot to do by listening and observing, which is why there is a lot of value to saving sex for a marriage, because you can use the early days to just talk and observe and learn all the things you should be learning. Another thing that can clue you in on their financial habits is understanding what their values are. Understanding what their values are can also help you determine if this is somebody that you see yourself fitting into their life. Because if you have some shared values together, you can start to have shared dreams together, things that you think you can do together that money can help you get to. So for example, trips you can go on, investments you can do together, and just looking at how they spend their time and their resources, and if this is something that you really want to be a part of your life. These are the early days when you're just observing and learning by looking, for real. But then it comes to a time where you actually have to ask the questions, and this doesn't need to be something that has like the we need to talk task, and it doesn't have to be like a lot of questions at the same time. But like, you get to a point in your relationship, and I would say like somewhere between 4 to 6 months, where you're actively dating. This is not somebody that you think you like. This is somebody that you have made a commitment to each other that this is a relationship. This is not a friends that feelings are just entering it. Like, you've been clear about your commitment to each other. At that point, you can bring up the conversation to really have a heart-to-heart about money, and don't feel like this is a taboo. Ask about heavy topics. So here you can talk about, so you went to school, you have 3 degrees, do you have any student loans? And they can tell you, oh no, my parents actually paid for all of that. That can lead you into further discussions about, the kind of family they came from, how they handled money, and things like that. You can ask questions explicitly here. Okay, so how much do you earn? How much do you have saved? Things like that. I don't think it's out of place at all. And I guess you might disagree with me on this one, but if you do, let me know what your thoughts are. So how do you approach having money conversations in relationships, and how has it come up about what you earn and what they earn? Of course, when you're having these conversations, you need to realize that it's a two-way street. You can't be asking all the questions and not telling them yours as well. So you ask some, you answer some. Do you have any debt? You answer, do you have any debt? Stuff like that. As you go in relationships, getting financially naked comes naturally. In the previous point, we talked about things like, how much you earn, how much debt you have, and things like that. But as you go in relationships, you actually become more financially intimate. The same way as you're growing intimate emotionally, you feel free to also talk about your fears about money, the things you grew up around. Maybe you grew up really poor, and now like you're really nervous about money, and you feel the need to hold everything down to you. Or maybe you saw your parents work so hard and not enjoy as much, and you feel very passionate about going on trips and living your life in the now, and not waiting for some dream retirement or moment to live life. Like, you go from just having these conversations about how much you earn to actually what shapes you, what skeletons they might be holding in their closets about their backgrounds and their money, and you really can learn how and if this is the person you want to build a life together with. It really does bring you closer together when you're able to talk about not just your everyday life, but your fears, your worries, your dreams and hopes. And these things come out as you grow together in a relationship. So make time to talk about these things, but also realize that as you go deeper, some of these conversations should be happening, and if they're not happening, make the time to have the conversation, like the person in the story we started with. And even after that big conversation about earnings and all, it gets better. You grow deeper as you go. Some things to be cautious about are like, we have before major decisions, like this person was saying, moving in together, marriage is another big one. You should be talking about big money things. Some people want prenups. I personally don't believe in them, because I feel like when you get married, all that is yours should be, it's like you go from having mine and yours to ours. But I understand if you feel the need to have one, but these things should come before major decisions. You should start talking about like how you're going to split bills, how you're going to split expenses, what you're going to do jointly. And on the internet this week, I saw this woman who said she broke up her engagement 3 days to her wedding because she found out, not found out, but like she realized that up to that moment, the fiance had been saying, I'll pay for things, and he had not paid anything towards the wedding. Imagine planning a wedding. Weddings on average cost about 25 grand in Canada, but anywhere in the world, I'm saying they will at least cost a couple hundreds or thousands depending on your currency. And imagine that one party has not contributed at all. Like, don't you have a job? Don't you have family members? Nothing. It's just very strange. And to see that, on one hand, I'm like, girl, why did it take you 3 days before the wedding before you realized this? But also kudos to her, because I know that at that point it must have been really hard, because everything was set in stone already and they probably lost a lot of money. But if you're thinking about your future, it's not worth it. No amount of sunk cost is worth going forward with that, with somebody who is not willing to be an equal participant in your lives together, because you might just continue carrying the whole relationship. So before major decisions, have conversations about money, and money conversations are kind of ongoing. I feel very strongly about some things about money, but I obviously can't impose them on you. So I think even if you disagree about, money, you can find ways to find middle grounds. If one person is a big spender, maybe they can have a certain limit, like their own account that they contribute to and that they spend on when they need things, and joint accounts that you use for investments that nobody touches except you've both had the conversation, and that way you kind of safeguard yourself from the person's habits and things like that. So it's possible to have different opinions about money and still agree, but what is hard to find a middle ground on is when both of you are feeling stuck in your own ways and you feel like it's my way or the highway. In those cases, it might not work and you might have to break up, like the couple we talked about at the start of the show. So the summary of today is, when it comes to money, it can be pretty personal, but it shouldn't be a taboo to talk about money and your financial health. It should be pretty normal. It is a part of your relationship, and if you're going to merge lives together, it simply makes sense for you to know about each other's money habits. So don't feel like you're doing some crazy thing by asking about your partner's habits and their earnings, but timing it well is pretty important, and understanding that at the beginning stages of relationship, your job is really to observe, to ask the right questions as well. But like, for things that are a bit more sensitive, it's okay to allow some time to pass, but then don't wait for forever. I would say, as a guide, between the 4 to 6 month mark, you should start to have had conversations about like finances and debt and things like that. And if things worry you about their habits, bring them up as well. There's no point pretending all is well in a relationship if it's not. And the earlier you find out about each other's habits, the earlier you're able to determine if this is something that you can work with or not. Anyways, this has been great talking to you guys today. My name is Fopsy Nkwacha, and this is the Dear Fopsy podcast, where we talk about all things love and relationships and how to know better and love better. A huge thank you to everyone who supports this podcast. Thank you for your likes, your shares, your subscribes, and all the ways you help the world know about this podcast. Definitely keep sharing it. And a giant thank you to our sponsor, Image Studio, your plug for digital media and events production support. All things graphics design, web design, event production, and digital marketing. Give Image Studio a call. I'm going to put a link in the description box, so definitely head over to the website and see and keep us in mind when next you need to have your logo designed, your website designed, or you have some fancy gadgets that you just got for your church and you don't know how to install and you need somebody to come through for lighting and audiovisual design. Well, they're your plugs. Until next time, keep learning, keep loving, keep living, something along those lines. Don't forget to subscribe if you're listening on YouTube. Bye guys.